first had the chance to spend time with and meet Amanda Berman at a conference a little over a year ago, and I was so blown away by her ability to help a room full of people see things in ways that they hadn't seen it before. And this was a room full of fierce Zionists who were so committed to what Zionism really stands for, the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. And Amanda really helped us understand some of the things that we've been seeing on college campuses and on social media and in other places. There are people who want us to believe that there is some sort of inherent contradiction between values that are actually incredibly compatible, like Zionism and anti-colonialism, like the idea that you can care about social justice and tikkun olam, and also care deeply about the particular needs of the Jewish people, as if somehow those things were at odds. Amanda is a civil rights attorney and then went on to become the founder and CEO of Zioness. To learn more about Zioness, you can just go to zioness.org. You can, of course, tune in tonight and listen to what Amanda has to say. But there are many, many opportunities, including a wonderful opportunity I had a while back to interview Amanda on my podcast if you want to learn more. But I'm so delighted that she came all the way from the East Coast to be with us. She was with our school family on Wednesday, and she's with us tonight. And on Sunday, if you want to join us, Amanda and I and Jacqueline and Ariel are going to go to Compton to visit our good friend, Pastor Michael Fisher, for a 9:30 a.m. service. And Amanda's going to share a few words there as well, because part of the work of Zioness is the Zahav Fellowship that helps bring Black Jewish voices into these conversations as well. And we're going to be working with Pastor Fisher to bring a group of Black influencers to Israel later in the year, actually early next year. Amanda, thank you so much for being such a voice, an important voice for our people and for the world. And thank you for coming to Stephen Wise Temple tonight to share some of your thoughts with us.
Good evening and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for having me. Who feels like it's been a hard moment to navigate American politics as a Jew? Anybody? So I started Zioness with the tagline, unabashedly progressive, unapologetically Zionist, because people were telling me that I couldn't be both of those things at the same time. People were telling me that as an American woman, I couldn't fight for abortion access and equal pay if I was a Zionist. People were telling me that I couldn't care about racial justice and fighting police violence if I was a Zionist. People were telling me that I couldn't care about LGBTQ equality if I was a Zionist. And I couldn't fight gun violence, and I couldn't fight for climate equity or for immigrants and refugees because Zionism is, as they say, a colonial idea, a white supremacist idea, a genocidal idea. And so if I was a Zionist, I was not compatible, as Rabbi Yoshi said. My values were not compatible with the values of the progressive movement. The problem with that is that I am all of those things, that I do care about abortion access. It's not because I'm an ally. We talk a lot in our community about our commitment to allyship with other marginalized communities, and that's really important, and it's real, and it's a legacy that I'm very proud of and that I want us to continue as Jews. But when I fight as an American woman for my rights as a woman, I'm not doing it as an ally. I can't just abandon that fight. I don't have the luxury of that. And for my LGBTQ Jewish friends, when they're fighting for their rights as LGBTQ members of the American society, they're not doing it as allies. They can't abandon that part of their identity just because Jews and Zionists aren't welcome in those spaces. For my Black Jewish friends, they can't stop caring about racial justice and equality and opportunity just because Jews maybe aren't welcome in some corners of the racial justice movement. And I could, of course, go on and on. Now, I know that right now a lot of people feel like the political right is a safer home or a more comfortable home for Jews, and particularly for Zionists and for people who care about Israel. I understand that feeling. I'm not here to debate it. I think it's really important that we have people for whom Israel is their one primary issue, the one issue that they wake up thinking about and go to sleep thinking about and vote on and are active about and fight for. I think that's really important because Israel, for me, is a huge part of my identity. And Zionism, for me, is probably the biggest part of my identity. In fact, it's definitely the biggest part of my Jewish identity. Because Zionism, for me, is the story of Jewish peoplehood. I was not born into a religious family. Like a lot of people, I went to synagogue on the high holidays and was bat mitzvahed, and that was about it. I spend a lot of time in synagogues now, very grateful for that. But Zionism was the thing that connected me to Jews all over the world. Zionism is our whole history. It's where we're from. We're the people of Zion, the children of Zion, born at Mount Zion, who for thousands of years longed to return to Zion. There were Jews all over the world during the exile who weren't connected to one another. They didn't have social media. They couldn't turn on the news and see other Jewish communities either thriving or being violently persecuted or whatever was happening. They were operating in all of these different corners of the world, eating different foods and speaking different languages, participating in different cultures. But every Friday night, they lit Shabbat candles and they said the prayers, sometimes with the same melodies that we sang tonight. And they prayed in the direction of Zion and prayed to return to Zion. Zionism is so intrinsic to Jewish identity that it cannot be separated. Just the same way as my female identity can't be separated from who I am, my Zionism can't be separated from who I am. And so for those who exist in the political right and they're proud Zionists, that's amazing. I think that wherever we are, ideologically, politically, we should be Zionists. And while I don't have solutions to all of the political challenges we're facing, that is the one thing that we at Zionists think can be part of the solution. If you're in the political right, there are some isolationist, ascendant isolationist tendencies that you're going to have to fight to make sure that your ideological home is a safe space for Jews and Zionists. And in the left, we have a lot of challenges too, no question about it. But when I have helped members of our Zionist community in cities, in chapters all over the country, think about how to engage in the social justice movements that matter to them, again, not because they're allies, but because they are deeply connected for their own rights, their own bodies, their own freedoms in America, help them engage and show up, and help other non-Jewish progressives in those spaces understand what Zionism means. It changes minds, it changes ideas. The thing about anti-Zionism that so many of us are experiencing in the left is that it's not really about Israel. It's not really about the war. It's not about the Netanyahu government. When Jews on college campuses are targeted as Zionists and told they can't participate in the same classes and extracurricular activities of other students, it's not criticism of any policy happening on the other side of the world. It's the same recycling of the same anti-Jewish ideas that we've heard over thousands of years that have led to the worst violence, the worst targeting of our people all across the globe. It's the blood libel. It's the ideas of Jewish power and influence. It's about Jewish loyalty. And Jews as Zionists, also another anti-Semitic trope. Anti-Zionism targets Jews for participating in all of the spaces that we operate in. And it is about that. It is about targeting Jews. And so once you understand that, you realize that the best response, and here I'm quoting a dear friend of mine, Einat Wilf, if anyone knows Dr. Wilf, she's a former Knesset member in Israel. And she said, and I believe this to be so very true, that the best answer to anti-Zionism is more Zionism, prouder and more confident Zionism, more deeply embedded and engaged Zionism. So when we go out in the world as members of the progressive movement and say, we are Zionists, we are Zionists, we are unabashedly progressive and unapologetically Zionists, and you will never force us to choose either piece of those identities at the expense of the other, it makes people think, well, how can it be that you could hold both of those values? Because I was told that they're incompatible. I was told you can't be a Zionist and a progressive, or you can't be a Zionist and a feminist. And now I'm seeing all of these people who tell me that you can. If I thought that Zionism was colonialism, and then I met somebody who explained to me that Zionism is actually decolonization, the most successful decolonial movement in human history, that would make me ask some questions. Actually, Zionism is the return of an indigenous population to our ancestral homeland and the expulsion of the British imperial forces from that region. It's not colonization. Actually, if you thought that Zionism was white supremacy, or you thought that Israel was an apartheid state, and you thought that Zionism is racism, and then you meet a Zionist who cares about racial justice, you might ask a couple of questions. You might say, how can it be that a Zionist cares about racial justice? I thought that Zionists were white supremacists, and here you are, as a person who doesn't look white to me, fighting for racial justice in America. Help me understand. And so we train people to respond, to say, actually, in Israel, 60% of the society doesn't look European. Actually, 20% of Israeli society are Arabs. 4% of Israeli society are Ethiopians. Israeli society is one of the most diverse in the world. That's really hard for people to understand. The irony of kicking out Jews and Zionists from these spaces is that it doesn't only harm our community, though that would be enough of a reason to fight it, that it does harm our community, and that as progressives, we're supposed to care about protecting vulnerable populations. And so, of course, we want the progressive movement to protect Jews. But anti-Zionism does not only harm Jews. The message that we have been declaring at Zioness since we started 7 years ago is that we were going to lose all of our rights if we didn't fight the metastatic hate that is anti-Semitism that was spreading within the American left. And unfortunately, a lot of us now feel like that was true. Like the left couldn't figure out how to be consistent with its values, how to actually be anti-oppressive and genuinely inclusive, and really deeply try to understand the lived experience of this weird, tiny, persecuted minority group, the Jewish people. The left didn't understand how to confront a form of hate that doesn't really manifest in the same way as other forms of hate, and may be harder to identify, including for members of our own Jewish community. It's sometimes hard to understand. But the problem is that anti-Semitism destroys everything it touches. It ends every movement. It destroys entire continents, as we've seen in the past. And so the anti-Semitism that has been growing within the left over a very long period of time has really deeply harmed all of our movements. When the Movement for Black Lives adopted a manifesto in 2016 that said that Israel was an apartheid state and accused it of committing genocide, it drove a lot of Jews out of racial justice movements. It sent a message that we are not safe in those movements anymore. That didn't only harm Jews. It harmed all of the Black Americans who need committed activists to fight for their rights. When Jews are kicked out of LGBTQ equality spaces, it doesn't only harm Jews, it harms everyone who cares about the rights of that community. I know we talked about this already, but when Jews are driven out of any space, it is a symbol that that space is no longer healthy. And I know a lot of us have been experiencing that pain. And I know that a lot of you, whether you personally exist within the left or not, you probably have kids or grandkids who care deeply about these justice values. You probably have kids and grandkids for whom these are issues that are going to affect their lives and bodies too. And they may be asking themselves, if I want to fight for those rights, if I want to fight for American democracy, if I want to make sure that my rights are safe and protected here in this country where I live and work and vote, and it is so hard for me to be a Jew and a Zionist in these spaces, maybe I just shouldn't be a Zionist anymore. I'm hearing that a lot, at least I was before October 7th. There's an opportunity that's come over the last year, and I wouldn't ask for the circumstances for anything. But more Jews have been connected to their Jewish identities and to their Zionism than ever in the work, at least as long as I've been doing this work. There's something unbelievable about the fact that when we were attacked, the worst attack since the Holocaust, more of us woke up the next day and put on a Jewish star necklace or put on a yarmulke or put up a mezuzah than ever in my lifetime. That is the resilience of the Jewish people, that when we are attacked, we stand up a little taller, a little prouder. And that's what Zioness is about. It's about saying, if you come for me in my space, in a space that Jewish women, Jewish leaders, Jewish activists have been at the forefront of every progressive movement in the history of this country and really the world. If you come for me in my space and tell me that I can't be a Zionist here, I'm going to be a prouder Zionist here. I will never abandon my Jewish identity or my Zionism, and I will tell you how wrong you are, because if you call yourself a progressive, you're supposed to care about the liberation of all persecuted minority communities, and that includes the Jewish people. If you call yourself a progressive, you're supposed to be consistent in the way that you apply progressive values. If you call yourself a progressive and you have justified or even celebrated rape and torture and kidnapping and beheading babies, you're not a progressive. Now, Zioness was originally about reclaiming the word Zionist. It was about creating a really passionate, really proud, really strong community for those of us for whom that word represents such a big part of who we are. Along the way, I've heard people say, actually, we should just let go of the word. If anybody knows Frank Luntz, the Republican pollster, he did a poll about the word Zionist about a decade ago, didn't come back very positively. So he's been saying, maybe we should stop using it. I feel a direct attack with that. Just kidding. The thing about that is that sometimes data doesn't actually lead us to a solution. Because if we are not allowed to call ourselves Zionists today, we will not be allowed to call ourselves Jews tomorrow. And I am not willing to let go of the word Zionist. I don't think we should have to, and I think that because of what it means, because of what it expresses, because of the history, because of the whole story of Jewish peoplehood, of the Jewish nation, reclaiming our indigenous sovereignty after thousands of years of exile, Zionism is, to me, the best example of a miracle that could ever exist. And I want to reclaim that. There's a new challenge now, and not everyone will agree with it, but I think it's important to mention anyway. That as much as I want to reclaim the word Zionism, I also want to reclaim the word progressive. I want there to be spaces, every political space in America, to be safe for Jews. I want us to get to a place where when we have political debates as a community, it's about policy, not which space is safer for Jews. I don't want to talk about where Jews are more abused or more harmed, or which ideological structure hates Israel more. That's not a healthy conversation for us to have. And the progressive movement really matters. In fact, the progressive movement in America is what created a civil society, a thriving democracy that allowed Jews to be safe and free in this country. I want us to have a healthy progressive movement that fights for everyone's rights, including ours. And I want us to have a safe liberal movement and a safe conservative movement. I want every space to be full of proud Jews and proud Zionists who get to advocate for whatever values they hold without ever abandoning who they are. So what I would say to you is that if there are people in your life who are experiencing this challenge, trying to navigate, am I a Zionist or am I a progressive? I know that a lot of times we have such strong feelings that we want to convince people not to hold the political or ideological views that they have. What I would say that instead of trying to convince them not to hold those views, let's try to convince them that wherever they are, they should hold on to their Zionism. They should bring it with us. They should do what I joke that I do, which is tattoo the word Zioness across my forehead. Wear a sweatshirt or a tote bag or a t-shirt. Post on your social media that you're a Zionist, because that confidence, that courage and commitment to your Zionism, it's contagious. If you say you're a Zionist, it's going to inspire someone else to say they're a Zionist. It's going to inspire someone to ask you a question about what Zionism is. If you're in the progressive movement and you say that you're a Zionist, and someone says, I thought a Zionist was a bad thing, and you get to explain Zionism is a liberation movement. Zionism is a movement for freedom and security and sovereignty for a persecuted community, you're going to change people's minds. So wherever you are, wherever you sit ideologically, whatever drives you and motivates you, bring your Zionism with you and talk about it and inspire other people to talk about it too. Shabbat Shalom.